Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're well. It's Rabbi Akiva Males, and today is Wednesday. It is the 14th of December, and we're getting ready for Parshas Vayeshev, and Chanukah is right around the corner, too. So I want to share with you today something on the Parsha. First, something that's just purely a Parshas Vayeshev related, and then I want to share with you something that's both Vayeshev and Chanukah related. So let's jump right in. Parshas Vayeshev has so much in it. Primarily, it's the story you'll see of Yosef and his brothers, and how that relationship went. Let's see what happens here. We're going to jump right into after Yosef was sold into slavery. So he's down in Egypt. He's been sold into slavery, and he is working in the house of Potiphar, one of the officers of Paro. He's the Sarah Tabachim. That either means he was his chief butcher or it means he was his chief executioner. There's a dispute in the commentaries what that means. But it was a very high, a man with very high rank in Paro's cabinet. Yosef is working for him, and Potiphar's wife takes up a great interest in Yosef and is trying to seduce him. And Yosef is turning down all of her advances. And the Pasuk tells us, it's in Perek Lamed Tes, that's chapter 39, Pasuk Yud Aleph. And it came about on a certain day. Yosef goes to the house in order to do his work because remember he's in charge of all the affairs, all the household affairs in that home. And it so happened to be on that day that Yosef shows up to work. There's no man there. There's no one there. The only one who's there is the wife of Potiphar. So she sees nobody's around, and now's her chance. She's finally going to have her way with Yosef. So she grabs him by his clothes, and she says, I want you to be with me. I want you to be intimate with me. I want to have this affair with you. Yosef chose to leave his garments in her hand because she was clutching him by his shirt. And he fled, and he goes outside. So he left. Now, what happens when you read the psukim next is she's left with his shirt, she's left with his garment, whatever garment it was, and she starts making all these accusations about Yosef, about what he came there to do, how he was trying to assault her, and she gets him in a lot of trouble. Yosef finds himself in jail. The obvious question is, Yosef seemingly could have prevented all this by just grabbing his shirt, grabbing his clothing away. Why did he allow the Ashes Potiphar to remain with his garment? Now that's evidence that could be used against him in court. So let's see the Ramban. The Ramban's bothered by this, as many other commentators. And Ramban writes, Vayazov bigdo biyada, and he left his garment in her hands. So he says, L'chavod gevirto. He left this in her hands in honor, to honor this his master's wife. Lo ratza lo tzio miyada bekocho agadol mimena. He didn't want to use his strength. He was stronger than her. He didn't want to use his strength to, let's say, shove her, push her, rip the garment out of her hands. The Heser oso me'olam. He could have, so what did he do instead? I'm sorry, I skipped a couple words. Again, he didn't want to use his superior strength to take the garment out of her hands because it was out of respect to her. He didn't want to fight with her, struggle with her. So what did he do? He just took it off. She's grabbed him by his cloak. She grabbed him by his shirt. So I'm not going to fight her. I'm not going to shove her. I'm not going to rip it out of her hands. He just quickly loosens it and he gets out of it. It was an outer garment, one that you could easily wrap yourself up with, like some kind of a shawl with sniff or a scarf or something of that nature. So it was something very easily that he could have just quickly disrobed from. So what was bothering the Ramban? Ramban's bothering by the fact Yosef is a young man. He's in the prime of his life. There's no way that Ashes Potiphar was stronger than him, that the wife of Potiphar could have outpowered him. He certainly could have fought with her and grabbed it and not left anything behind that could be incriminating evidence. Why didn't he do that? Well, because that would have been very disrespectful to his master's wife. So because of the fact of Yosef's high code of conduct, Yosef did not want to struggle with her, didn't want to fight with her, didn't want to do anything that could have been disparaging to her. Now, what's astonishing when you stop and think about this is, so what did Yosef do? He left his garment there, which seemingly got him in a lot of trouble. Now, Yosef was no dummy. Yosef, it tells us one of the reasons why Yaakov loved him so much more than the other sons was because it says he was Ben Zekunim. What did Ben Zekunim mean? Rashi tells us at the beginning of the parsha, Ben Zekunim means he was so knowledgeable, he was so smart that he was able to share all of his information, all of his knowledge with him. So Yosef's no dummy. Yosef realizes he's got two choices. He could grab his garment, struggle with her, grab the garment and run, which would leave him in a much better position if she would hurl any type of accusations against him, or he could leave it there, which would be very respectful to her, but it could put him in the hot seat. And what did Yosef choose to do? He chose to leave it there because he did not want to disrespect his master's wife. So that's a really big idea. We say this idea of derech eretz kadmon Torah, just how important it is to act with derech eretz. I mean, that's a huge example on Yosef's part, is that he acted with derech eretz, even it could have seemingly got him in trouble. Let's see another approach to this question, though. The Aznayim LaTorah. It's time to look back at Rav Sorotzkin. We haven't looked at him in a couple of weeks. So let's see the Aznayim LaTorah. So Rav Sorotzkin writes as follows: that Yosef chose to leave his garment in her hands and he runs outside. Yosef certainly understood that she was going to, by leaving his garment there, she would use that garment to libel him and to make up all sorts of false accusations. So why did he leave it there? Why didn't he struggle with her to get it out of her hands? So she wouldn't have any incriminating evidence to use against him. Certainly Yosef, in the prime of his life, he's this young man, strapping young man, he certainly could have overpowered her. To take what was his out of her hands. Why did he just flee in a panic? What was he thinking? So again, the same thing that was bothering Rabban. Rabban gave us his answer. Let's see what Rav Sorotzkin says. Rav Sorotzkin says as follows: Yosef lo nas mimeno ach mi'etzer hara. Yosef did not run away from her as much as he ran away from his evil inclination. He's in a terrible situation right now. He's got this woman who's been trying to seduce him. One could imagine Yosef as a young single man in the prime of his life. He's got his own emotions raging, and it's a struggle not to give in to this temptation. So he's got a choice. He could either continue to fight to get his shirt back. All that while his temptations, maybe they'll finally get the best of him and temptation will win over logic. Or he could say, I'm out of here. I don't want to keep myself in a makom sakana, in a place of danger for even another minute, because maybe my temptations will get the best of me. So Yosef, when he ran away, it's not that he was scared of her. He was scared of what his yetzer hara, what his evil inclination was going to do to him. So Yosef says, if I'm being tempted by my yetzer hara, I'm out of here. I got to run. Hunas me'avera. He fled because he didn't want to find himself falling into avera, into sin. Bo, and what was fulfilled in this action? Shomer mitzvah lo yeda davar ra. Shlomo HaMelech tells us in Koheles that someone who keeps the mitzvahs, lo yeda davar ra, shall not know evil. Meaning, there's a havtacha, there's a guarantee that Shlomo HaMelech tells us that if we live our lives according to the mitzvahs, I'm not going to be harmed by the mitzvahs. If I'm doing the right thing, the mitzvahs are not going to be the cause of my downfall. So Yosef depended on that idea, that adage of Shomer mitzvah, lo yeda davara. He says, I know it's risky leaving my shirt here, but it's far more riskier to struggle with her and keep myself in a place of temptation for a second longer. I'm out of here. And Yosef runs. And he says, look how this played itself out. That shirt, that item of clothing, that cloak, whatever that remained in her hands to be used as incriminating evidence, in the end of the day, we're about to see, according to Chazal, that actually ended up helping him. What? That shirt, that seems to be the incriminating evidence. He's going to say no. Shomer mitzvah lo yeda davara, because Yosef had to flee to get out of there because it was a place of temptation. That shirt that he left there didn't end up being incriminating. It actually ended up helping him. How so? So let's see what he says here. He says, Kimavur b'Moshav Zakenim Parshas Vayigash. If you look at the Moshav Zakenim, that's some of the writings of the Balei Tosfos. In Parshas Vayigash, So we're going to read that in a couple weeks. In Parshas Vayigash, what ends up happening is Yosef's appointed to a very high position in Paro's cabinet. That's after he interprets his dreams and whatnot. And Yosef goes about, when the famine kicks in Egypt, he goes about redistributing the land and moving population all over the place and acquiring everything for Paro and his treasury. And the pasuk tells us that the only segment of the Egyptian population that Paro did not acquire, the only land that he did not acquire, was that which belonged to the Kohanim, belonged to the priests of Egypt. So the question is, why does it seem like Yosef had Rachmanos on the Kohanim of Egypt, or the priests of Egypt? So on that concept there, on that section, this is what the Moshe of Zakanim is going on in Vayigash. So he quotes him as follows. Shepotifar Masar as Mishpat Yosef leKohanim, that when Yosef was accused of trying to attack the wife of Potiphar, so Mr. Potiphar had to do something about this. So he wants to send him to court to figure out how should we judge him. So he sends him into the court that's being run by the wise men, these Kohanim, these priests of Egypt. The Hema Amru, what did they say? They say there's a simple way to tell what really happened here. There's no video, so how are we going to tell what happened? Was Yosef coming to attack the wife of Potiphar, or was she trying to assault him? So they say there's a simple way to tell. Shim nikra habeged milfanav. Let's take a look at the garment. Where was it torn? If it's torn on the front part of it, Simon shehu takafosa, that seems to indicate that Yosef was trying to attack the wife of Potiphar. Vikaras bigdo, and while she was fighting back, what did she do? She ripped his garment because he's attacking her he's in the front. Yosef's front is attacking the wife of Potiphar. If she's struggling and fighting back and the garment's ripped, it's going to be ripped in the front. That would seem to indicate that Yosef's guilty. But if the tear is on the back of the garment, Simon shehu barach mimena, that would seem to indicate that Yosef was trying to run away from her. And she chased after him. And she grabbed him by the garment. And because Yosef just kept running because he wants to get out of there, that's why it's torn on the back. That's what the Kohanim said. That's how we'll figure this out. So the Potiphar says that makes a lot of sense. So he brought that garment, because remember, Yosef left the garment there that his wife had seized. So Yosef's garment is brought before the Kohanim, these judges, these priests. And what did they see? That in fact it was torn in the back of it, meaning Yosef was trying to flee, and it was the wife of Potiphar who grabbed him, and she tore it because he was trying to get out of there, and she was trying to hold him back. So the Kohanim said, as far as we're concerned, he's innocent. So they're ready to let him off the hook. So why did Yosef end up in jail? So the Moshe of Zakanim ends by saying, Potiphar, they said to Potiphar the following advice. Don't kill him, don't execute him, because he's innocent, but you should still do something to him. You got to give him a slap on the wrist. So put him in the jail, because you want to honor your wife. It's your wife is obviously an important part of your life. The wife of Potiphar could have been a very influential woman in Egyptian society, and he's your wife. You want to maintain your marriage. So we think Yosef's innocent, so don't kill him, but you got to mollify your wife. So what do? You got to come across like you're punishing Yosef. Okay, so throw him in the jail. Now, Yosef wasn't languishing in a filthy prison. We know that in that jail, Yosef became the warden. He becomes the chief of the prison. He's living well. He's eating well. Everything in there is fine, and he's kind of in charge there. But he's in there just because he's got to mollify his wife. Nimsa, so how does it all turn out? Sha'azivas habeged, Yosef's decision to leave his garment behind, biyada, in her hands, hetzilaso me'onesh mavis, actually ended up saving him from the death sentence. So Rav Sorotzkin saying, what an incredible illustration of shomer mitzvah lo yeda davara, that if someone's trying to do the right thing, we're not going to get burned for it. We're doing a mitzvah. God's not going to let me suffer for having done a mitzvah. And this is such an incredible illustration of it. So look at a very different answer than the Ramban. Again, the same question. Yosef could have easily have overpowered her. Why did he leave it behind? So Ramban answered, because that would have been a lack of kavod. That would have been very disrespectful for his master's wife to start fighting with her. So he just says, you know what? I'm just going to leave it here. I'm not going to overpower her. That's the Ramban. Rav Sorotzkin says as follows. Yosef had to get out of there. To struggle with her means to stay in a place of temptation for a second or two longer. I can't do that. My taivas, my feelings, my emotions, my temptations, everything is running wild. He's got this seductress who's after him. He can't stay there for another moment because he might give in to sin. So he also says, I gotta run because I don't want to be a sinner. So he was running for the sake of a mitzvah to get away from his Yetzer Hara. So that's why he got out of there. That's why he left his cloak. What gets in next? Shomer mitzvah lo yeda davara. God says, I can't have it that someone who did a mitzvah, someone who was trying to do the right thing is going to suffer for that. So what looked like a curse, what looked like incriminating evidence, actually saved his skin. That's what actually saved him. Because when she started making all these accusations, it was that shirt, it was that garment that was left behind that the Kohanim said that could actually be evidence that he's innocent. Fascinating. All right, let's move on. I want to share with you something that's both Vayeshev related and Chanukah related. We're going to have to put on our thinking caps for this one, but let me introduce it. We've spoken and we've mentioned him before. There was a great Gaon. There was an incredible genius, Torah genius that led Polish Jewry in the 17 and 1800s. His name was Rav Shlomo Kluger. He would have been very young in the 1700s, so he really comes to prominence in the 1800s. Rav Shlomo Kluger was a prolific author. Again, he was known as the Maggid of Brody. The town that he served as a Dayan, as the head of the Beis Din, was Brody, and he was also the Maggid. The Maggid, he was like the preacher. He was back then, the shul rabbi wasn't giving a drasha every Shabbos. The shul rabbi's job was to basically learn halacha and answer everyone's halacha questions. Who was the one who was offering the drashas that were meant to inspire everyone and bring them around and do good? That was the town had an official maggid, official of Israel, because sometimes it's called the Dover Mesharim, someone who was going to have like a golden tongue, who was going to be able to preach the correct matter, to bring everyone around and inspire everyone. So Rav Shlomo Kluger served in the town of Brody for more than 50 years as both a dayan, one of the chief judges on its rabbinical court, as well as the Maggid. He was the chief darshan in town for many, many years. Rav Shlomo Kluger was a prolific author. He wrote many, many svarim. Not all of them were printed, and in fact, I've read in some places that very few of them were printed. He left tons of manuscripts, and there are institutions that exist in Israel, maybe here in America too, that are still hard at work poring over those manuscripts and bringing them to print. I learned this week about a series called Kehilas Yaakov, and it's on the Yom Tovim, and basically it's an institute in Israel that has poured over the writings of Rav Shlomo Kluger, some that were published, some that are still non-published, and they want to organize them into themes. So, for example, this Kehilas Yaakov series seems to be on the Moadim, on the Yom Tovim, on the holidays that occur in the course of the Jewish calendar. So I saw that there's one volume on Chanukah. So I actually ordered it. I hope to have it before Shabbos, and I'd love to look through it for Chanukah. What it seems to be, I found that online. I was able to read parts of it online. It looks like it's mostly short pieces, a page or two, that ask a question and have beautiful insights on Chanukah. And it's collected from various writings of Rav Shlomo Kluger. Some of them, again, were published, and some of them seem to be yet to be published. I want to share with you a beautiful one today. Again, we're going to have to put our thinking caps for part of this, but I think it's going to be exciting. Let's take a look at what it's going on. He's going on, if you look at in our Parsha, in Vayeshev, it begins with the sale of Yosef. So let's look at these psukim that detail part of the sale of Yosef. So it's in Perek Lamed Zayin, that's chapter 37. So let's see. Pasuk Yotes. V'yomer ish al achiv hinei bala chalomos al hazeh. Look at that. The dreamer is coming. Remember, Yaakov sent Yosef, his son, to go check on the brothers who were shepherding the flocks by Shechem. So now they see from a distance that Yosef's coming, and they hate him because of his dreams. They think he's out to get them and bring back bad reports to Yaakov, etc. Chaf 20. Their initial plan is, let's go kill him. And then we'll throw his corpse into one of the pits that are out here in the wilderness. And if we get asked, we'll tell Yaakov, he was devoured by wild animals. And that'll basically put an end to those dreams that he has and this idea that he's trying to ruin us. So that was their initial idea. Reuven hears about this plan. Reuven saves him. And he says to the brothers, he makes a very convincing argument, Lo nakenu nefesh. Don't do that. You don't want to go through life knowing that you killed him directly with your own hands. Don't do that. You don't want to live with that guilt. You don't want to live with that. Instead, Reuven says, Vayomer aleim Reuven, al tishpechu dam. Don't kill him with your own hands. Hashlicho el habar hazeh asher bamidbar. Throw him into that pit in the wilderness, but throw him in while he's alive. Don't kill him and then throw him in the pit to hide the body. Throw him into the pit while he's alive. He won't be able to get out. He'll die in the pit by natural causes. But this way we wouldn't have killed him biyadayim. We wouldn't have killed him directly. And that way you'll sleep better at night. It's okay, you caused his death, but you didn't kill him directly. That was what Reuven told the brothers. However, that wasn't Reuven's real intent. The Torah now throws in Laman itzil osom yadam. Reuven's true intent was to save him from their hands. Lashivo elaviv. He was going to come back at night after he was thrown in that pit. He would go down there with a rope, let Yosef out, and he would sneak him back, bring him back to dad, bring him back to Yaakov. That was Reuven's real goal. Reuven couldn't tell that to the brothers. He was outnumbered, and they really had it out for Yosef. So what does he do? So to say, he plays on their side. He tells them, I also hate Yosef, but why do we got to kill him directly and live with that guilt? Instead, let's throw him in a pit, let him die of natural causes. We'll sleep better at night. But his ultimate goal, his real goal, his true goal was to bring Yosef back to his father Yaakov. Okay, Chav Gimel, next pasuk. So as Yosef approaches the brothers, that's exactly what they did. Vayavshitu as Yosef as kutanto as k'son sapas masher alav. They grabbed Yosef and they ripped off that special cloak, that special garment that Yaakov had made for him. They took it away. They took him. And they threw him into a pit. And the pit was empty. There was no water in it. And we know how the story plays out. But ultimately, why we bring down these psukim? It was Reuven. It was Reuven's grand plan that saved Yosef's life. That was Reuven's plan. Let's take another look. There's a pasuk in Shir HaShirim, in the 7th chapter in Perek Zayin Shir HaShirim, that says as follows: Hadudaim nasnu reach. The dudaim, here it's translated as pots of figs. Again, there's different translations of dudaim, nasnu reach. They give off a nice fragrance. And on our doorways, there are all manners of migadim, of sweet fruit. Chadashim gam yishanim, some are new, some are old. Dodi tzafanti lach. I have hidden away for you, my beloved. Very cryptic pasuk that Shlomo HaMelech has written in Shir HaShirim. Let's see a medrash, and this medrash is going to be plenty cryptic as well. So this is a drasha. This is a one-page drasha from Rav Shlomo Kluger, what you're looking at on page 3, in that Sefer Kilas Yaakov that I told you I ordered this week, and I'm looking forward to receiving in the coming days. And Rav Shlomo Kluger, this is a section they've put together. It's on Chanukah. He's going to quote a very, very strange-sounding medrash. So go down, and here's the second headline there. The medrash, there's a medrash that says as follows: Hadudaim nasnu reach. That pasuk in Shir HaShirim, they darshan it as follows: Hadudaim nasnu reach. The dudaim give off a fragrance. Ze Reuven. That's a reference to Reuven, shehitzel es Yosef, who saved Yosef's life. And at our doorways are all sorts of treats. Zener Chanukah. That's talking about the menorah for Chanukah. What on earth is the connection? It seems that this medrash is saying Hadudaim nasnu reach. Those dudaim give off a fragrance. That's referring to Reuven. And what about Reuven specifically? That Reuven was the one who saved Yosef's life in this week's parsha. And what's the next part of the pasuk in Shir HaShirim referring to? Ve'al pisachenu kol megadim, and at our doorways we have all sorts of treats. That's talking about the menorah of Chanukah. That's what Shlomo HaMelech is getting at in that pasuk. That's what the medrash says, and it's obviously a medrash that's screaming, "Explain me what does that make any sense? What is Reuven saving Yosef? What does that have anything to do with the menorah at our doorway at Chanukah?" Now, here's what's amazing. I found, and again, I don't have the Sefer yet. I ordered it. I should have it in another day or two. But what I found online when I was looking at the Sefer is that Rav Shlomo Kluger was fascinated by this medrash. And he gave, from what I could tell, maybe there's more. It looked like about 20 different explanations of this medrash. It seems like every year for like 20 years, he kept coming back to this medrash and trying to say, here's a new interpretation. Here's a new way to understand it. It's such a puzzling medrash, and it's screaming, explain me, darshan me. And Rav Shlomo Kluger, being the incredible darshan that he was, it seems like he kept coming back to it. And from what I could tell, it looked like there was about 20 suggestions he had in different seasons, different years, different Chanukah years. What do we do with this medrash? I'm going to share with you this one here. It looks like this is called, they've put it together as number 9. Drush Tess is not 9. So let's take a look at this together. And we'll get through this. You're going to see part of it we're going to have to think, but we'll get through it. I thought it was beautiful. We're on page 3. It says Drush Tess. So here we go. We're at the first paragraph, right-hand column. So it says, Ukfar milesi amura bezeh bezraso yisparach bekama drachim. He says, I've already offered many different explanations for this cryptic medrash. Now I'm going to share another one. With God's help, I'm going to give you another way to understand this medrash. That seems so puzzling. Many of our early commentators asked, why on Chanukah do we not have a mitzvah of Mishta and Simcha the same way we do on Purim? One of the ways that we commemorate, part and parcel of how we commemorate the Purim miracle, is by having a festive meal, the Purim Suda. Why is it that we have nothing like that on Chanukah? Yeah, on Chanukah we have a minhag to get together and have nice meals, but that's not part and parcel of what the ikr, of what the main way of celebrating Chanukah is. Why is that? So many of our early commentators have offered different ideas. They've been puzzled and they've offered different ideas. B'tiritz halavush. So the lavush, that was one of our early achronim around the time of the Ramah of Mordechai Yafi. So what did he answer? Mikoach, he wanted to say as follows. The Purim hoyat salas hagufim. So Purim was a time where our very bodies, our physical nature were threatened. Haman wanted to kill us all. So how do we celebrate the fact that our physical bodies are survived? We have a meal. But Chanukah, it wasn't our bodies that were threatened. The Yevanim didn't want to eradicate us. They just wanted to wipe out religion. The Chanukah have a rak hatzalas nefashos. Chanukah was hatzalas nefashos. It was that our spirituality was saved. So that we celebrate with Hallel and Simcha and Shira and songs, and increased Torah learning, but we don't celebrate it with a physical meal. Now, the wording is a little strange. The way the Lavush said that, again, look at this wording. The wording of the Lavush was that what was Purim? Purim was Hatzalas Gufin. That was huge, Purim. Our bodies were at risk. And what about Chanukah? Have a rock, Hatzalas Nefashos. That was only spiritual danger that we faced. So if you just look at the Lavush, it sounds like which one is more severe? Physical danger or spiritual danger? It looks like what's more severe is physical danger. Because again, what did he say? In Purim, we faced physical danger, physical annihilation. So that's why we celebrate with a Suda. Chanukah was only spiritual problems. So we don't have a Suda. So it sounds like spiritual problems is less of a big deal. Bataz, the great Turei Zav, so Rav David Alevi Siegel, he wondered about this. Tama, he says, Miperish Rashi. Rashi tells us later in the Torah that machti ladam kosher yosem hargo. If I cause another person to sin, if I ruin someone else's spiritual life, that's even worse than killing that person, because I've ruined their neshama, I've ruined their relationship with Hashem. So it seems as if a spiritual downfall is far worse, I should say, than a physical annihilation. So what did the Lavush mean when the Lavush says that his explanation is that on Purim we faced physical annihilation? That's why there's a Suda. Chanukah, that was just a spiritual problem. So the Taz says, I really don't understand what you mean by that. You seem to be saying that spiritual threats are less severe than physical threats, but Rashi doesn't say that. Let's skip to the next paragraph, because again, he brings up something that's a little tangential. Let's skip to the next paragraph. The paragraph begins, Ach nira de hamedrash mefarish binyan acher. Here's how we can explain this medrash about Hadudaim, Nasnu Reach, and that's referring to Reuven who saved Yosef, And then Al Pesachenu, Kol Magadim, and our doorway, the treats, is talking about our menorahs for Chanukah. So here's what he says. And the first word on the next line, Dine Ruvain Amar, Ruvain said in this week's Parshas Vayeshev, Al Tishbechu Dam. He says, let's not spill any blood. V'hinei yesh lomar b'zeh shtei kavanos. There's two ways to explain what was Ruvain's motivation. When Ruvain said, let's not kill him, there's two ways to explain his motivation. Oh, the first option is, Davi avor latzilas Yosef shlo yargu. He was trying to save Yosef's life. He didn't want Yosef to die. Oh, the second option to explain why why Ruvain says to the brothers not to kill Yosef, Davi akavana latzilo sam shelo yu hargei nefashos. He was trying to save the brothers from being murderers. In other words, what was Ruvain's real motivation? When he suggests, let's not kill Yosef, what was motivating him? Was he trying to save Yosef's life? Or was he trying to save his brothers? He didn't want them to have a criminal record. Shouldn't be on their record, their spiritual record, that they were murderers. So he says as follows, Vimkein hare Torah amra. That's why the Torah steps in, and the Torah says, I'm going to tell you what was really motivating Ruvain. The Torah tells us what was Ruvain's ultimate motivation. When he told the brothers not to kill him, it's not that he was looking out for the brothers. He doesn't want them to be murderers. His real motivation was he wants to save Yosef's life. Muchach, that proves that kavana shalo, that what was his true kavana? His real kavana was Yoser lahatzilas Yosef. His real kavana was to save Yosef, not to prevent the brothers from sinning, that they shouldn't have a record that they were murderers. His real motivation was to save Yosef. So what do you see? What seems to be proven from Ruvain's actions as the Torah understands them, and Torah testifies, that it's more important to save a life than it is to prevent someone from sinning. Because the Torah is telling us what was Ruvain's motivation and why is he going to be rewarded? Because what did Ruvain want to do? Ruvain wanted to save Yosef's life. He wasn't so concerned about saving the brothers from being called murderers. He was more concerned about saving Yosef's life. Don't try to tell me that saving someone from sin is more important. But that wasn't Ruvain's intent. The Torah is singing Ruvain's praises. Let me just fix the page here. The Torah is singing Ruvain's praises. It's saying that what did Ruvain do? He wanted to save Yosef's life. So it's like the Torah is testifying to us. It's more important to save a life than it is to prevent someone from sin. Then what would come out? It's like the Torah is criticizing him, saying you didn't do right. Your kavanah should have been, your intention should have been to stop the brothers from sin. That's not what the Torah is doing. The Torah is praising Ruvain for his actions, which was what? To save a life. So it's like the Torah is paskening. The Torah is telling us that's what's most important is to save a life. So now we've answered the Lavush. No, because what happened? The Lavush said a statement. The Lavush said that by Purim, we were under physical threat. That's why we get a Suda. Chanukah, that was only spiritual threat. So the Lavush seems to be saying, yes, saving lives is more important than saving someone from Averas. That's what the Lavush would say. Look at Parshas Vayeshev, and you'll see that I'm right. Next paragraph, Vine B'Purim. If you look at the story of Purim, there are many things that occurred in Purim to remember the miracle. We do many things to remember the miracle. Megillah, we read the Megillah, and then we have a party. Mishlach manos, we share gifts. But when it comes to Chanukah, in Shum Davar, Rak Hadlakas Neros Ala Pesach. The only mitzvah we have for Chanukah is just lighting our menorah at the Pesach, at the doorway of our house, back in Eretz Yisrael. That was where they would light it, outside the house, right at the doorway. That's what the Medrash is saying now. Hadudayim nasnu reach, that the Dudayim gave off a fragrance. What does that mean? Zeruvain, sheitzel es Yosef. That's a reference to Ruvain, because what do we know about Ruvain? He saved Yosef's life. Hu nasan reach, he was the one who gave us the reach, the understanding. That that saving someone's physical life is more important than saving a person from sin. And therefore, at our entranceways, at our doorways, our megadim, our treats. The chol megadim b'Chanukah, the only treat we have for Chanukah, have ala Pesach v'lo yoser, is that which is at our doorway and nothing more, which is the menorah. Mikoach the muchach. So what do you prove from here? The Purim adif k'divrei alavush v'asi shaper bezos Hashem. So he says, what are you seeing from here? That Purim, so to say, is more important than Chanukah. What are you saying? Reuven proved to us that Hatzalas Haguf is more important than Hatzalas Nefashos. That's what Reuven proved to us. So how do we say that? Because look at Purim. What do you have by Purim? By Purim, you have so many ways to remember the miracle. You've got Megillah, you've got Mishlach Manos, Matanos Lavionim, you've got a Mishnah, you've got all that. Why? Because that's Hatzalas Nefashos. That's Reuven. Hadu Daimnas Reach. There's so much there that Reuven did. He saved a life. But al pisachenu megadim, and our doorways magim. When it comes to Chanukah, we only have one mitzvah, menorah. Why? Because it's not as much on the scheme of what's more important, saving a life or saving someone spiritually. Saving the life is more important. Let's continue. Now we could understand that what do Chazal say in the Medrash? They say Dim Reuven Yodea Shakasav Kosev Alav Lamani Tzil. If Reuven would have only known that the Torah was going to testify about him, that his real goal was to save Yosef, he wouldn't have just thrown him in a pit, but rather he would have put him right on his shoulders and jogged right back to his father, to Yaakov, to bring him back. Because it's like embarrassing. Reuven now looks at the Torah and he says, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I'm going to be recorded for all eternity. What happened? Now that I know it's being recorded, if I'd only known that, I would have put him on my shoulders. That's what the Medrash says. They know move on. It's not clear what that Medrash means. Atu chas v'sholom Reuven yichavein l'shem he's parus v'gaiva. What's motivating Reuven? That he wants acclaim? He wants public recognition? Acha kavana, he says, how do we understand that Medrash? The Reuven ayolo shnei drachim. That Reuven had two options. I'm just going to fix the page here. Good. He could have either saved the brothers from sinning by just convincing them not to kill him, or save Yosef's life. Reuven really did want to save Yosef's life. But Reuven himself was thinking like the Taz, that what's more important is to save others from sin. And therefore he thought, Reuven thought, I feel so bad. I feel bad that my real intent was to save Yosef's life, but that was his true intent. But he thought like the Taz, that what's more important is to save people from sin. So Reuven, in a sense, was always feeling bad, thinking like, I'm a little ashamed of what I did. I saved Yosef, and that was my real goal, was to save his life, but it wasn't as important as saving the brothers of sin. That should have been my motivation. So Reuven's always feeling I had the wrong motivation. Therefore, it says as follows: Kimin d'chsev ashrei nasoi pasha kiso chet. The Gemara. What does the Gemara say? How do they understand that line in Tehillim? Just to fix the page again. So he says, what it says? Chatzif alai man demefarish chatai. Why? In other words, if he would have put Yosef on his shoulders and carried and jogged him back, it would have been abundantly clear that what was really motivating Reuven was the fact that he wanted to save his life. And he was a little embarrassed about that because the true motivation should have been to stop the others from sinning. That's why he planned to do this so secretly, that when no one was looking at night, I'll sneak down there and I'll get him out. That way no one would know what his motivation was. But if Reuven would have only known that the Torah is going to testify about him, that his real goal was to save Yosef. And the Torah is paskening when it says that, like the Lavush, that what's more important if between the motivations to save a life or to save from sin, the Torah is paskening. What's most important is to save a life. Kiven Galacha. So now it comes out that Reuven really did have the right motivations. And if he did have the right motivations, he wouldn't have waited till it was in the middle of the night to save Yosef secretly. He would have done it smack in the middle of the day at high noon. At high noon, he would have put Yosef on his shoulders and carried him back home to his father. Pirsum, with publicity. Ba'asi Shapir. Now it all makes sense. So it's a fascinating idea that Rav Shlomo Kluger is saying. He's taking this cryptic medrash that says as follows. It says you had the Dudaim, you had the give a reach, and al Megadim, and al Pisachenu Megadim. So what's Shlomo Kluger saying is that, Reuven wanted to save Yosef, and that it was Reuven who taught us that by saving Yosef, and the Torah telling us about that, and telling us his motivations was to save his life. So it's like the Torah is posting, that's what's most important. That indicates to us that, yes, saving lives is more important than saving from sin. That's the reason why we have so many mitzvahs for Purim. We have a Mishnah, we have Megillah, we have Meshlach Maros, Matanos Levyonim, and by Chanukah we just have one, because what was Chanukah? That wasn't about saving lives. That was about saving spirituality. So as important as that is, it's not as important as saving lives. That's how he wants to explain that medrash. And he says, now what we said that, now it makes perfect sense. That other medrash that says, if Reuven would have only known what the Torah was going to write about him, he would have put him on his shoulders. What, you think he's looking for kavod? No, now that Reuven knows that what's really most important is that idea of saving lives, now I got nothing to be embarrassed. I was initially going to take Yosef out at night when no one was looking, because I was embarrassed that everyone should see my motivation was to save his life, when my real motivation should have been to stop the brothers from sinning. But now that the Torah paskin that the best motivation is to save a life, so then I would have done it in the middle of the day. Had I only known that. That's what Shlomo Kluger wants to do with that. I thought that was very clever. But I want to share you one more approach I saw this year to understanding this medrash from Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef, there you got a picture of him in a brief bio. And let me tell you what Rabbi Yosef does. It's very short. We'll read it in the Hebrew. It's beautiful. But here's the wild thing. I bet you Rabbi Yosef, he came up with this on his own. I'm never going to accuse him of plagiarism. This is beautiful what he's going to say. But as I was flipping through that sefer about Rav Shlomo Kluger, one of his approaches that I saw how he wants to explain his medrash is very, very similar to what Rav Yosef did. So it's like Rav Avadia, I'm assuming, was mechaven. He came up using his own Torah knowledge. He came up with the same approach that Rav Shlomo Kluger came up with 100 years earlier. I thought it was very, very cool. Again, if he had seen Rav Shlomo Kluger's sefer, he would have quoted it. He didn't quote it. God forbid, he's not a plagiarizer. I'm sure he came up with the same idea on his own. That's called being mechaven. He came up with someone else's, the same idea as another person did, an earlier person. Let's look at what Rav Avadia Yosef did. I found this online on a Sephardic website that's dedicated to sharing teachings of Rav Avadia Yosef. So in middle of that of a piece, all of a sudden I saw this. Look at this. Ubir bezeh, using this idea that he said earlier. Bir bezeh Maran Avinu Malkenu Rabbeinu. Look at those. Only the Sephardim praise their Rabbanim that way. Avinu Malkenu Rabbeinu Avadia Yosef Zecher Tzaddik V'Kadosh L'Bracha. So based on an idea that we just said over, Rav Avadia wanted to use this idea to explain a very cryptic medrash. What was at the root? What caused the Chashmonim, the heroes of the Chanukah story? What enabled them to be the victors? It was the Torah that they were engaged in. The zuchus of that is what enabled them to win against the Yavanim. Because they were engaged in Torah study, that's why they deserved the miracle. And they were able to beat their enemies, which was completely outside the realm of, outside the laws of nature. Now he's going to say, once this is true, that we're saying the whole success of the Chashmonaim was based on their Asik B'Torah, their engagement in Torah study, now we can explain a very cryptic medrash. And here it is. So the pasuk in Shir Hashirim says the Dudaim gave off a fragrance, and al Pesachenu kol megadim, and at our entranceways are these treats. Hadudaim nasnu reach zeruven, al Pesachenu kol megadim elu neros Chanukah. Ulechora ma shaychus ben Dudaim shal Ruven leben neros Chanukah. What's the connection between the Dudaim and Ruven and then Chanukah? Ubeir Zos Maran Rabbeinu Zeicher Tzadik V'Kadosh U'Bracha. Rav Avadia had the following suggestion, which I told you, I think he was Machavin to Rav Shlomo Kluger in a different drasha. It says as follows: Ki kafi shenemar b'Torah. This is beautiful. Follow this. He says the Torah tells us Al Yedei Dudaei Ruvain. Because of the Dudaim, where else do we say Dudaim come in? That's what Reuven had collected. Rachel saw the Dudaim, and she asked Leah, can I have the Dudaim of your son Reuven? So he says that's what's going on. Al Yidei Dudei Reuven, because of the Dudei Reuven, no lad Yisachar ben Leah. That's what caused Yisachar to be born. Huh? How did Dudaim cause Yisachar to be born? Because if you remember, he puts in the parentheses, Ki Rachel lacha mea Dudaim. Rachel bartered. She said, I want those dudaim. According to many Mefarshim, she thought they would have medicinal effect to help her bear children because she was still barren at that point. So she wanted those dudaim, but she traded. What did she trade? She wanted dudaim shematza Reuven ben Leah. She wanted dudaim that Reuven, the son of Leah, had found. Vitra Yaakov. She traded. It was her night to be with Yaakov. And she traded. She said, you can have Yaakov tonight if I can have the Dudaim, because I'm barren, and I think those Dudaim will help me conceive. I'm willing to give up this session that I had scheduled with Yaakov. I'm willing to give that up to you, Leah. And that night, Va'az nolad Yisachar. That's when Leah conceived and had Yisachar. So it was the Dudaim of Ruvain that brought about Yisachar. Uchiyadu, and it's well known, Yisachar hayom mofes haTorah. Yisachar is one of the Shvatim that it is most prominent in terms of his Torah and his scholastic accomplishments with Torah. HaChachma ve'abina shu hamid masayim roshei Sanhedros. The Gemara says there were 200 heads of Sanhedrin who came from Shevet Yisachar. U'zechus Torah social Yisachar, and it was the Torah, the merit of the Torah of Yisachar. Hisha amda lavosenu liskaber oyeveim, and it was the Torah of Yisachar that Yisachar promulgated, and Yisachar brought so much Torah into this world. It was that Torah and learning that Torah that enabled the Chashmonaim to beat their enemies. But Yisachar played a huge role in that. Yisachar were disseminators of Torah. Remember, it says Yisachar were the ones who were learning Torah. Zvulun were supporting them. So Yisachar were the ones who were sharing Torah with Klal Yisrael. So it's because of Yisachar that the Chashmonaim had so much Torah, were able to learn Torah and then beat the Yevanim. So that's what it means, that at our doorways are megadim elu neiros Chanukah. That's ner Chanukah. Sheboim lafitzas ora elyon el rishus harabim. It's the ner Chanukah which adds light and spreads light and brings it out. Leine kol over v'shav, and everyone who sees it will see that light and remember the miracle. The ner mitzvah v'ora Torah kshurim u'misladim. They're linked. So look what he's saying, and I saw this. Rav Shlomo Kluger says in a different drasha says the same idea. It says, what does that medrash read now? Hadudaim nasnu reach, that's Ruvain. Dudaim brought reach, that's Ruvain. Ruvain's Dudaim brought about Yisachar, which brought about so much Torah, and it was the Torah which enabled the Chashmonaim to beat the Yevanim, and that's why al Pesachenu kol megadim. That's why at our doorways we have megadim elu neiros Chanukah. That's Chanukah. So if you want to link, what connection could there possibly be between Dudaim, Reuven, and Chanukah? That's what Rabbi Vaji is saying, and he was mechavin to what Rav Shlomo Kluger said in one of the at least 20th approaches to how to understand this medrash, is that it was the Dudaim of Reuven which brought about Yisachar, which brought about so much Torah learning, which gave zechus, gave merit to the Chashmonaim that they should have been able to beat the Yevanim. That's why we have Chanukah. So that's the beautiful medrash, a cryptic medrash, but now it makes sense. Hadudaim nasnu reach, that's Reuven. Al pesachenu kol megadim elu neiros Chanukah. Those are the lights of Chanukah. Now the connection makes sense. Beautiful. All right. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope that these sources were ones that could make your Parshas Vayeshev a bit more meaningful, a bit more accessible, and also it'll add to your appreciation of connecting Parshas Vayeshev with Chanukah. With that, I'm going to end the recording,